I'm Lisa Bleich, and I am the president of College Bound Mentor. I've been helping students find the right college for them and successfully communicate what their strengths are and what makes them unique for the past 9 years. Hi everybody, welcome. Thanks for coming. I am Lisa Bleich, and I met a lot of you at the Christmas party, so back in December, and Cynthia was nice enough to invite me over to do one of these talks, which is great. I am from New Jersey, but I spent a lot of time out in LA because that's where I grew up. So I'm sort of bi-coastal. I feel very comfortable in it. Now, what I like to do at these meetings is really to kind of give you an overview of the process to kind of get you to start thinking about sort of where you can stand out in the process. And I put together the college application wheel to really help you guys think through sort of the process of applying to college, but more importantly, the process of sort of discovering what you're good at and then how that's going to contribute to a college environment. Colleges want to create a community of learners, okay? They want to have people that come together, just like at your school. You know, some people are good at math, some people are good at programming, some people are good at art, some people are leaders, some people are intellectually curious. There's lots of different ways that people can contribute to that college community. And the goal is to understand what it is about you that makes you unique and different, and then what are your pieces of the pie that are going to make a difference, all right? So what I'd like to do tonight is I'd like to go around the wheel. And does everybody have something to write with? Yeah? Okay. If not, grab a pencil so that you have something to write with, because I'm going to have you kind of walk through it as you're doing this, so you can start to set some goals for yourself, and you could start to identify where you can make maybe some changes or some improvements, or where you can just keep going with what you're doing. So the first piece of the pie is academics and test scores, right? So everybody there. So most of you, I want you to write down your schedule right now, just in your mind, or actually write it down. Don't do it in your mind. Write it down your schedule, what you have right now, okay? How many of you are starting to choose your classes for next year? Is that sort of where you're at right now? Okay, you're having to figure that out, right? Okay, so right now, I want you to ask yourselves, and you don't have to answer it out loud, but maybe you'll want to share it with some people later. But I want you to identify for yourself, am I working to my full potential? Okay, just sort of that overarching question. Am I working to my full potential? Am I working as hard as I can work in the various classes that I'm taking? And then another part of that question is, I want you to identify, like, are you sort of at the precipice between that B plus and A minus, or that B and that B plus, or that C plus and that B? Kind of where are you, and what would it take for you to move the dial? Okay? So identify in one class. Let's just start with one class and see if you can answer that question. Am I working as hard as I can, and what would it take me to move the dial from, to get to the next level? Like, are you at that 89? I was always that 89 student, right? And I'd always get it to the 90, by the end, right? And I'm sure anyone in that boat where you're kind of at that 89 and you're kind of pushing to the 90? Yeah? Okay. So what you want to ask yourself then is, Trey, what is it going to take for me to get to that 90, right? Or to that 91? Is it, and write it down. Is it that I need to make flashcards in a particular class? Is it that I need to study a little bit earlier in the week before I have a test? Is it that I need to turn Facebook off for an hour a night and just focus on my studies, right? Is it, whatever it is, identify that thing for yourself. And I want each one of you to write a goal for yourself. I want you to write an academic goal for yourself, whatever it is, okay, for this year. The question I often get is, should you take an AP or an honors class, right, and get a B, or take a higher level and take a lower one? And that's kind of part of that question, right? So there's no recommended number that you should take. Every school is going to look at your class schedule in the context of what's being offered at your school, okay, and what your strengths are. If you're trying to go to a highly select college or an Ivy League college, so a highly select college is a school that accepts fewer than 50% of the applicant pool, which unfortunately, it used to be 150 schools, now it's more. They want to see the most rigorous schedule that you can manage. They want to see that you're challenging yourself, but they don't want to see that you're killing yourself. The rule of thumb is, if you can get a B or better without being up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and without having tutors on every subject, then you should be in an honors or an AP class if you can get a B or better in that class, okay? If you're struggling to get a B in that class, and it's sort of throwing off your ability to focus on your other classes, then you're at too high a level. So the next piece is test scores. So how many of you have taken the PSAT? You taking the PSAT? Okay. How many of you have taken the SAT? Carolyn, did you take it?
No.
ACT? Okay. You took the ACT. Okay, so you've already taken that. So there's two tests that colleges want to see. Either one is fine. So there's the ACT with writing, and there's the SAT, okay, the SAT 1. So you probably many of the parents might be more familiar with the SAT because that's what was probably more in the norm. But I will say this once and I'll say it twice. They're equally accepted. It doesn't matter which test you take. As long as you do well in one or the other, that's all that colleges want to see. So what you guys should do as a 10th grader is to identify which is the better test for you. Are you better at the SAT or are you better at the ACT with writing? And so how do you know? SAT is more of a reasoning test. It's testing your ability to problem solve and your critical reasoning skills. You have more time on each of the individual questions in the SAT, but they're trickier. So you have to be able to get through that trickiness of it. And you have to be a good reader. So the best thing you can do right now is to read. So what I recommend for sophomores is to just figure out which is the better test for you and then focus your energy on that test. If you're planning on taking AP Chem next year, don't take the SAT subject test until next year. If you're not planning on taking AP Chem next year and you're doing well in Honors Chem, take a practice honors subject test and see how you do. If you do 650 or better, then go ahead and take it as a sophomore because you won't get a chance to do it again until senior year, and then it's too late. So for the athletic piece to be a big piece of the pie, you want it to be something that you could be recruited for, okay? So all of you athletes here, one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, am I good enough to, well, first of all, do I want to play in a college? Do I want to play at the college level? So that's the first question. Then the second question is, am I good enough to play at the college level? Okay? And if I am, at what level? Am I good enough to play Division III? Am I good enough to play Division I? Division II, there's not as many schools, but it's usually Division III or Division I. And you want to try to understand that. And for some sports, it starts recruiting pretty early. So 10th grade, already you should be going to showcases. You should be going to camps where there's coaches from colleges if that's something that you think you want to do. You have to really look hard and deep and say, should I be spending 20 hours a week doing this? You know, every single season. What am I not doing because I'm not doing the sport? And if there's something that you else would like to try but you can't do it because of the sport and you really don't think you're going to make it to that Division I or that Division III, then you may want to think about doing other things. I know people don't always follow it, but what I recommend is that you have to look at the school and say, if it didn't have the sport, would I like the school? You know, and that's a hard thing to answer because you get lured by the sport. You know, you think, but you're really going to college to go to college. You're not going there to play the sport. But you kind of have to ask yourself that question, or are you committed to playing all 4 years? And it's a tough one. So special talent is, again, something that colleges really look for. So a lot of the schools, half of the admissions is the academics and the test scores, and half of it is the talent. So that's the thing that you have to consider, is to hone that talent. So intellectual curiosity is when you are interested in something beyond what you're doing in school and you've sort of taken it to a higher level. So leadership is something that usually develops, or people usually get into it by 11th and 12th grade, okay? A lot of times the extracurricular activity is something that will lead to leadership. So if you think about a way that you could be a leader, that could be doing something in community service. It could be on a sport. If you're on the team, do you think you could be captain of the team by your senior year or by junior year? So what I'd like you guys to do is I'd like you to write down a goal for yourself in terms of leadership. So what you want to do is you want to identify, okay, right now you're the class representative. What would it take for next year for you to move into a higher level, if you have an interest in that? And then by senior year, what position would you like to have? So starting a club is great, but don't just start a club to start a club. You know, start something that you're passionate about, something that you're interested in. Just like when you're trying to hire somebody, you want somebody that's going to contribute and somebody that's going to be a go-getter. But you also want people that are going to be intellectually curious, that are going to add to the discussion. So leadership is a really strong strength that a lot of colleges want to see. But they also want to see students that are intellectually curious, that are going to bring the conversation to a new level, that are going to add to the discussion, that are going to think about things in a different way, and that are going to add to the conversation in terms of what they're doing in the classroom. So there's lots of different ways for you to contribute. And the thing is for you to understand what do you think is your best way to do that and to go deep in that area, and so that you have something to talk about. So the other is kind of a catch-all. So the other could be if you are an underrepresented minority. Okay, so if you're African American, if you're Hispanic, if you're a girl in a STEM field, in a math science field, that could be another. If you will go geographically elsewhere, so in California, a lot of people go to the East Coast, unfortunately for you in California. So if you want to go to the East Coast, it's not going to be another because it's a very popular place. California is usually, after New Jersey, the most represented state in any other place. They want to see how you've overcome adversity. They want to see how you've had a struggle that you've overcome. And it doesn't have to be a huge adversity like I lost my house and I'm homeless. I mean, it doesn't have to be that, although there are people that have that. It could be something where you had a setback in a particular class or with a group of friends, or maybe you were in a new situation and you didn't really know what to do, or maybe you had a different way of looking at something because you went to a particular program and you were the odd man out. I mean, there could be any different way that you can overcome adversity, but they want to see that you've done that because that is an indication of grit. And grit is the new buzzword for college, is do students have grit? Can they survive when they get into college away from their families, away from their parents, even though they have the umbilical cord of the cell phone still attached, mostly the girls, not so much the boys. But that's something that colleges want to see, is you have that grit. The other big other is legacy. So legacy is if you want to go to the school that your parent went to, one of your parents went to. So if that's something that you want to do, that can help a lot. It depends on the school. Some schools really hold legacy more than others. Typically the private schools have it more. But the extracurricular activities, that's really just anything that you do outside of class. So if you are working, that's an extracurricular activity. If you are doing a lot of reading, that could be an extracurricular activity. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I had a client and she used to read, I don't know, she would read 20 books a month, right? So that was an extracurricular activity for her because she was a big reader and she was a big writer and she wrote a manuscript. And so it wasn't something that she was necessarily doing in the school community, but she was at home writing and reading, and so that was listed as an extracurricular activity. So they want to see how you're spending your time, and that's really the key, is how are you spending your time? Are you just watching TV? Are you just playing video games? Are you just doing your sport? Like, what are you doing with your time? And you laugh, but watching TV actually can be turned into an extracurricular activity or an intellectual curiosity if you do it the right way. I had a student who, how many people like the show South Park? Want to watch South Park? South Park? Okay, so he was a little bit older than you, but anyway, South Park was very popular. And he used to watch South Park all the time, and he was so astounded by the crazy things that would go on in South Park, and every week he would watch it, and he would be more and more amazed that they could get away with this on TV. So he started researching, was it Trey Parker, who founded the show? He started researching them. He started kind of trying to understand what was behind their sort of creative madness. And he was a very shy, sort of introverted kid. And he was doing an English project. And so he kind of got the inspiration, if they can do it, then maybe I can too. And he was a smart kid. He taught himself how to use Java. And he created for his project this video that was really out there and that was really kind of uncharacteristic of his personality. And everybody loved it. And and the teacher loved it, and the students were like, "Wow, that's great. You did a great job." So he wrote his essay about how South Park inspired him to be creative and to go beyond sort of just the typical thing. So the essay and all of these things, what I want you to think about, there's lots of different ways that you are unique and different, and every one of you has some unique story to tell. And so by doing something like this and trying to understand it, it's a way that you can start to really think about sort of what makes you different and what's going to make you unique. The last piece, and it's an important piece, is the financial piece. And the financial piece is something that as parents, as families, you need to have that conversation together to try to understand what is the budget for college. Is it a, carte blanche, whatever it is, wherever you get in will go? Is there actually a budget? Is it the price of a public school? You want to understand what the price is and have that conversation earlier rather than later so that you know that you don't get into a school and be like, well, sorry, this is not a school we're going to pay for. We're only going to pay for this school. And I have had that happen, and it's really heartbreaking for the kid when that happens. So I think it's really important to have that conversation. And the other piece is there's a lot of schools that give merit money. If you don't qualify for needs-based aid, then you might be able to get merit-based aid. And guess what are the things that typically get you merit money? Grades, test scores, leadership, special talent, and athletics. So these are the things, and community service is big depending on the school. So these are the things that are going to help you not only separate yourself from the pack, know where you stand, but also help you get money at certain schools. So it's really important to kind of think about this in a holistic way. Some things you might say, you know what, I have no special talent. Put an X in it. Don't even worry about it. Don't even think about it. Done, right? Some people might say, I am a quad. I have no athletic ability. Put an X in it. Not even going to think about it. The whole point is that each wheel is going to morph into what are your big pieces of the pie, and not everyone is going to have all of those pieces of the pie. You can't do all those things. I mean, people have different strengths. You're not going to expect it to do all those things, and colleges don't want you to do all those things. I mean, they might want you to be somewhat we used to be well-rounded, right? That was kind of what our thing was. But now it's really more of an angular student. So the freshman, what you should really be doing right now is you're trying out a lot of different things. You should start to really think about what you really like. What are the things that you're doing that really excite you? And what are the things that you're doing that you're like, oh, I'm just doing it because it's going to look good for college. So really then, and so that by sophomore year, you can kind of know what are some things you might be able to let go and what are some things you can go deeper in. And then also freshman year, get your study habits good, because sophomore year, and I'm sure a lot of you sophomores can attest to it, when you start taking more honors classes, more AP classes, the workload gets harder. So if you can get some good study habits in place now, by the time you get in, and time management skills, by sophomore year, it won't seem quite so hard. There's always a story to be told, and so you need to understand what is your story. What is your story? Now, I'm not going to say academics aren't important, because at the end of the day, you have to be in that, it's the cost of doing business. If you want to go to a certain school, you have to have the grades and the test scores, right? You have to be within the range. But it's that there's a lot of kids that are in that range. And they always, I don't know, it's not really a joke, but the saying is that they could fill the entire class of University of Pennsylvania with everyone they rejected, right? So it's not enough to just be in the range anymore. I mean, how many times do you hear the story of, oh, he had straight A's, he had, 2,400 on his SATs, and he still didn't get in. So that's just the cost of doing business. But you need to find what your story is so that you can really communicate to the schools why you're a good fit for the school. It's not just why you want the school, but it's why are you a good fit for the school. And I will say at certain colleges, community service is huge. So any of the Jesuit schools, any of the schools that put a lot of importance on service, they want to see that community service. And there's a lot, I've been seeing a lot of scholarships now for community service. But if you are not someone that wants to give back to the community, I don't mean it in a bad way or a flip way, but if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. So they want to see that you're passionate about something, whatever that something is. And if that is your thing, then that's great. Then that absolutely, and you should go deep in it. Trust me, you can tell when someone's writing something that they're not passionate about. And usually, often, I don't want to put any aspersions on the parents, but sometimes it's the parents who are like, oh, they've got to write about this, they've got to write about this, and they make their kid write about something, and the kid's like, I don't really want to write about this. And they write about it, and it's I can tell that it's not from their heart. I mean, you're going to college, obviously, to learn, to grow, to become independent, to hopefully prepare yourself to get a job, to learn how to think, to meet people from all walks of life, or maybe to people that are similar to you. Maybe you've always felt different in your set of friends, and you want to be with people that are similar to you. There's lots of different reasons. But there's so many other aspects of the community that's important when you're finding a school. It's not just, you know, the major and the location and the sport. There's a vibe. I mean, I visit probably 25 plus colleges a year. And the reason I do that is because I need to understand what is it like when you're at the campus. Go and sit in the cafeteria, have lunch, and eavesdrop. Or if you're particularly not that shy or you don't mind, engage with a student, talk to a student, ask them questions, ask them what they like. If you can, sit in on a class. Because when you sit in on a class, then you see what the learning environment is like. You know, there's some schools that are intellectually curious. There's some schools where kids are more achievement-oriented. They're more focused on grades. They're more focused on getting into a good graduate school. Now, those are all great things, but if you're somebody who likes to talk about, you know, the book that you've read and then extend that into the dorm and then extend that into the cafeteria and have that sort of a conversation, as opposed to, hey, what did you get on that test? Hey, did you study for your MCAT yet? Hey, did you do that? You know, there's different sorts of things. There's some schools that are work hard, play hard. So those are the schools that are just what they sound like. They work really hard during the week, Monday through Thursday, and then they drink and they party really hard Thursday through Sunday, right? So some kids like that, some kids don't. Some kids aren't going to want that kind of an environment. There's also some kids that they're more community-oriented, the campus, and some are meaning that it's a smaller school, so they're sort of focused in and there's a lot going on campus. Some schools, if you're in an urban environment, most of the activity takes place outside of the campus. I recommend 6 to 10. That's my thing. So I like to see 6 to 10, 1 to 2 reach. So and the reach is a school that, you know, it's a reach. I mean, you know, maybe you'll get in there. Or if you're really a strong student with really high grades and you're in the range no matter what, then it's a wild card because you just don't know if you're going to get in. I mean, you're in there, you're in the running. There's no reason why you shouldn't get in there, but they'll find one, you know, it's a wild card. 1 to 2 possible schools. So these are schools where you might be below in the grades, but right on the money in the test scores, or a little bit below in the, you know, in the test scores, but higher in the grades. So there's definitely a possibility you'll get in there, but it's not a shoo-in. Then a likely school is a school where you're right in the running. You know, you're on par with the tests and the scores. So from a numeric standpoint, you're in the running. And then 1 to 2 safety. And so those would be schools that you're getting into. Like, there's no question you're going to get into it because you're way above. You know, but the caveat to that is that you have to like all the schools on your list. So juniors, you should be thinking right now, like, who's going to write your letter of recommendation, and, you know, think about that. Sophomores, next year is the year that you're going to be finding that teacher to write it. And it's not necessarily the teacher that you are getting that, you know, that you're just breezing by and getting a really good grade in. It could be the class that was actually really hard for you. Well, I hope you guys all have a plan and that you are ready to tackle the next year. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it. What I find is that the reason that most students have a hard time and feel overwhelmed by the college application process is because there's so many, it's the first time a student has to make an educational choice for him or herself. You know, you typically go to school where your parents decide you should go to school, or where you live. It might be your neighborhood school, or it might be a private school, whatever the capacity is, but it's usually your parent making the choice. But for a student, they have to make the choice themselves where they go to college. Now, I know parents watching this are going to think, well, wait a second, I have some say in this. But if the student isn't engaged in this and doesn't understand where he's going, it's going to make it really hard. The other thing is that the biggest single investment that you will make after purchasing a home is a college education. College's education costs anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 for 4 years. And so it's an investment in trying to find that right fit, and it's also an investment in your child or yourself to understand what makes you sing, what makes you shine, what makes you different. And that's going to take you for the rest of your life.